or 3 as we're live, but I always give it a minute just in case. That is a mouthpiece in TJ Hawkinson's mouth, but it looks like a Fatty Bo-Batty blunt.
Gene drew it. Gene drew it.
You sure Five-ish didn't do that? Like, I didn't know TJ Hawkinson loved the devil's lettuce.
Michigan, it's a return to smoking Jay Cutler.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought he ate a glove.
I don't know. All right, boys, let's jump on this thing in 3, 2, 1. The top 5 biggest preseason movers are we're going to talk about right here on this show. It is the Audible Live. Dr. Jene Bramel, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, and yours truly, Cecil Lammey, talking about all things NFL. And that includes Zach Moss's hamstring, Dr. Gene, as we start in Buffalo. One of the movers actually is Devin Singletary, because we haven't got to see Zach Moss. It sounds like we might now.
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's one of these many players where we don't really get enough information to know whether this is more of a day-to-day and cautious situation or a week-to-week, something that might linger a little bit longer. So not worried too much about him right now. But again, as we've been saying for the past couple of weeks, if this lingers on into that closer to the final week of the preseason, it's time to get a little bit more concerned. So hopefully we'll see him back at practice soon.
Gene, I guess it's time for a weekly Dak Prescott update. I just see these reports. He's trying some longer throws. He's trying some things. How can we make sense out of this injury, knowing that it seems like it's eventful when he tries to throw the ball more than 10 yards right now?
And I think, firstly, it's reassuring that we weren't sure last Thursday night. I thought it was a little bit bizarre that he'd have an MRI in the middle of his recovery timetable, but he was throwing very shortly afterwards, and they really haven't shut him down for a period of time. So I think this is part of what you would expect, or probably what the Cowboys were expecting to do, maybe from the get-go, which is to allow him to do a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So, as we move along a little bit, you'd expect him to be able to, or at least they'd expect him to try to drive the ball downfield a little bit more forcefully and see how he did with that. So again, another player I'm not too worried about just yet. The Cowboys have been pretty consistent in saying that they expect him to be ready for week 1. You'd like him to see him do a little bit more with each passing week. So we've got a couple of weeks for him to prepare, and hopefully that'll be the case.
Gene, tell us a little bit about DeAndre Swift's injury in terms of limited practice. Are you getting concerned about him being able to start off the season in good shape?
The news on Thursday was that they allowed him to do quite a bit of work with the first team today. Now, whether that means they allowed him to take contact, I wasn't really able to tell from the tone of the tweets that were there. But to allow him to get back to work and then start to do some more in-team drills were a good couple of weeks before the start of the season. I think that bodes well for him. He's got to navigate this all-important 7 to 10-day reconditioning timetable effectively and without an aggravation. But he's off to a good start so far. Hopefully he'll be ready to.
It is the Audible Live here Thursday nights, talking football with you and going around the injury news and notes with Dr. Jene Bramel. When will Courtland Sutton be able to jump? I guess that's a bad way to put it, but like, he can make cuts, Dr. Gene. Like, he's never been really fast, so I'm not like he's lost speed. It's just, he doesn't get a whole lot of separation, but it does make cuts. He doesn't seem ill-affected by that in terms of stepping slow or being working gingerly with that leg. But if anything's above his head, he doesn't go get it like he used to. So where is that part in the recovery from a knee? Is that kind of at the end where guys, get that vertical game back?
Well, you wonder if that's more of a mental situation where he's just not ready to explode up in the air yet. Maybe the physical side is there. He just has to do it a couple of times to put that little bit of mental hurdle behind him. I don't know that that's a specific enough part of the rehab timetable to say that he's just not ready yet. Heard some good things about him over the last couple of weeks, but again, those last steps of recovery are always the toughest. I think everybody's a little bit different too. So almost everybody that had an ACL injury last year had more than just a simple ACL, and everybody's going to recover at a little bit different frequency and ability to do so. So I wonder if that's a little bit more of a mental situation for him. And again, got a couple of weeks yet to allow these players to kind of get over it. And hopefully when the adrenaline comes on for real, when they're playing in a live game situation, they're able to overcome those last obstacles in their mind.
Now is Bloom on mute? Or is that
He's
me?
talking about goldfish again, I think.
It's a tribute. It was a tribute to Dr. Gene.
Okay.
It was a tribute to Dr. Gene. Gene, we can throw a whole bunch of players here that have come off the PUP list in the last week, like Curtis Samuel, Amari Cooper, and so on. Should we look at them any differently right now? And I know they have to make it through that first 7 to 10 days. You've coached us well, so we know, assuming they make it through that first 7 to 10 days of reconditioning without incident, should we look at them any differently than we would have if they had just shown up to camp without an injury and been okay?
Just a little bit differently. Again, we're not examining them. We don't know exactly where they are. I think there's every reason to hope that they're ready to start the season as healthy as possible. But when you're still rehabbing an injury and you're not fully in condition at the start of camp and have all of training camp to go through the process there, you have to be a little bit worried that there could be a slow start. I think there's every reason to expect a player like Courtland Sutton, who we already have concerns about in the reconditioning period, struggling. And the same thing may go with Amari Cooper, but it's going to be very much a day-to-day process for these folks. I still think it's probably more reasonable to have those players settled a little bit down in a little bit lower part of that same tier before we draft them a little bit higher, unless it's clear that they've been recovered enough to do a little bit more. So, and I don't know that we're going to get, these players are probably not going to participate in preseason game where you get to see a look and see how they do with your own eyes. I think it's probably going to be week 1 or week 2 before we know for sure. So in general, move them to the bottom of the same tier you'd have them, and then be ready to move them up again when they prove that they're ready to go.
Gene, I know that he's not a fantasy player, but he certainly affects a lot of fantasy players, and that's Tevin Jenkins. Can we talk a little bit about the back surgery and what you expect from that?
Yeah, I don't think it's been specifically reported. A lot of times when you hear what was said about his particular surgery, you worry about whether or not they're trying to remove some of the offending parts of a disc between the two vertebrae there, and that can be a 3 to 4 month situation. And I think that the hope is that he'll be back sometime this year, but it's, you would expect him to start the season on injured reserve, rehab, and see what his core strength looks like before he's able to come back. And that's assuming that it's a discectomy type procedure. If it's something a little bit more than that, it could definitely be a season ending situation, but I don't see that that's what's expected at this point, but it's probably going to be mid-season before he's fully ready to return.
It is the Audible Live making the rounds with Dr. Jene Bramel, and my youngest daughter's in marching band, and the new instructor wasn't giving them enough water breaks, in my opinion. So I let my opinion be known, which is something I can do. And now they're getting water breaks. The reason I bring this up, Dr. Gene, is the Mark Andrews dehydration thing. That's really scary. When he passes out, and I believe had to get carted off the field, correct me if I'm wrong, just, tips for these teams to watch out. The recovery that Andrews would have, they're probably IVM, right? And, is he good to go? Is it something to still concern yourself with? Water breaks are, the Broncos get 3, I think, and they're 5 minutes each. This is a new thing for the Broncos. I don't know if it's league policy, but that Mark Andrews news today about him passing out was very disturbing.
And knowing that he's a player that has type 1 diabetes, it adds a little bit of concern to, what his hydration level is and what have you. I'm not up just yet on the specifics of what happened with Andrews. If he was carted off the field, that's obviously a concern. But I think the larger point you make here is that heat-related illness is something that should be fairly evident to folks at this point, and it's a completely preventable situation. And to lose control of your body's ability to monitor its own temperature and what that might mean for all your organs and things over time is a huge consideration. So water breaks, teams have those GPS chips on their shoulder pads now, and hopefully folks are being watched in that respect as well. And players now know that they can speak up. It's been 20 years, I think, since Corey Stringer's unfortunate passing with heat illness, and we hear about it every year. I'm always paying attention this time of year when we're talking with families about what's going on with two-a-days and how to make sure that you're keeping yourself hydrated before and during and after these practices as we go. And every year we hear and read about high schoolers, college folks. Thankfully, there hasn't been a major issue in the professional ranks recently, but it happens every year. And so, if parents are out there listening, it's not just water breaks during practice, but make sure that your folks are as hydrated as they can be leading up to practice as well. It's more of a pre-hydration and during hydration as much as possible. So, and have your kids speak up if they're not feeling well. And I'm glad that you're advocating for your kids there, Cecil. That's a good thing for families to do as well. If they're hearing something that just doesn't seem right when your kids are coming home from practice, definitely something you're going to want to speak up about as well.
And I'm still doing it. I see.
Still doing
Everything's still me. I said it might be hotter for longer than it used to be when we were kids. I don't know. Gene, I'm trying to figure out a good way to phrase this. I almost want to say, is there any reason for a veteran to play in the preseason? But I also want to say, is there any reason for a veteran to not play in the preseason? If a team rang you up and said, we're worried about injury, should we just let our guys sit for the preseason that are important? Or if a team said, we want to play everybody, is there anything wrong with that? What would you say?
I think that's player to player dependent. And teams are going to know the answer to that better than we are. These players come in for their entrance physicals, and they'll have a sense of what the conditioning is, whether or not there's a little bit of a weak area that needs to be worked on a little bit, and they'll know their team situation best. So new coach, new coordinator, maybe that's somebody you want to get a little bit of reps out there, somebody that, like Joe Burrow, that's telling you, I'd like to play a few preseason snaps so I get in that live game action. You just can't replicate that in team drills. Some of these shared practices are a good opportunity to do that, but it's something different about the adrenaline that these players are likely to feel when they're playing in front of fans, live game competition against somebody else. So I think that's a player-to-player situation. I don't think it's a huge issue if players play in the preseason, but you're talking at this point about adding another, however many snaps you're going to get in a preseason game, but an extra 3 weeks of wear and tear, when probably not a lot of indication that it makes much difference come the early part of the regular season as far as hitting the ground running there, so to speak. So player to player dependent. I don't have an issue with players participating in the preseason, but I don't think there's much argument for a team or a player that says, I don't need these reps necessarily and I'll be ready to go week one.
Well, Gene, I'd personally like to bang on the Bengals for the fact that they've allowed us to they prevented us from seeing Carl Lawson at his best, and now he's torn his Achilles in Jets camp. And I'd like you to comment about his possibility of return, and add on to a larger question, contrast, defensive ends from running backs, because I still got folks who seem to have a lot of hope for Cam Akers actually having a starting running back career, but I'm not there. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of highlight what the possibilities are based on what we've seen in past history with running backs and Achilles tears.
Yeah, Carl Lawson won't be returning this year. That's every bit of an 8 to 9 month injury. The only silver lining in this is it's happened early enough in this 2021 season that you would expect him to be able to participate in training camp next year if all his rehab goes well. The sample sizes that we're talking about here are relatively small. I think we could probably list out less than 20 running backs that have been through this procedure, and the names of the running backs are not particularly spectacular. So, we talk about football being a game of inches and a game of just slivers of percentages, and when you're a fraction of an inch less explosive than you were before, especially at such a deep position as running back is, full of athletes, that's a hard thing to overcome. But I always reference the edge rushers and some of the wide receivers as pretty reasonable comps for running backs, and why, maybe there's a chance that Cam Akers is able to recover well enough to have a sizable role in the future. From Greg Ellis to Derek Burgess to Julian Peterson, there have been a number of players that have come back to having double-digit sack seasons, and even fairly far along into their career, into their late 20s and early 30s in the cases of some of those players, where they have been able to explode off the line as a straight-line edge rusher and be successful. So it's a difficult recovery. There are advances in surgery and rehab protocols that are making it more likely that players recover, but it's a tough recovery to handle. So hopefully Lawson's able to do that. The track record at the defensive end, the edge rusher position, is a little bit better than running back. So maybe you feel a little bit better in that regard, in that it's a little bit vertically explosive rather than laterally explosive that you would need as a running back as well. So, the jury's out on Cam Akers. He is going to be a very strong data point in the same way that we've had some other players be some data points with those patellar tendon tears as well recently, to know how some of these bigger tendon injuries will go. So I share your pessimism on Cam Akers for all sorts of different reasons, not just because of the injury itself, just the rapidly changing nature of the running back position. But I think Carl Lawson is going to get every opportunity as a valued edge rusher, as somebody that the Jets gave a sizable contract to get the opportunities to recover. And hopefully he goes the way of Burgess and Ellis and so many of these other edge rushers in the past.
It is the Audible Live, and now hear this. Are you tired of the same old fantasy contest? I mean, who is it? Come on now. Think you got what it takes to flex on the competition and win this season's hottest fantasy football contest? Well, then check out FanUp. Get that FanUp app. Everybody's talking about it. FanUp on the App Store for Apple. Must be 18 years or older to play. Restrictions apply per state. FanUp at Just Be Fans. Join an awesome community of over 50,000 fantasy and esports fans who love to compete against each other and team up as friends for the ultimate prizes and bragging rights. It is FanUp. Download that app in your App Store. Sign up starts this week. They end Thursday, September 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Very specific. Fan up and just be fans. Dr. Gene, let's get you for one more tour here and appreciate your time as always. And I make it full known, and all three of you are going to nod your head in succession like, I'm not the brightest guy in the world. So when this guy, Dave's not here, says A.J. Dillon has a calf injury, I'm worried because that's a huge calf to have to heal. It got me thinking about the ranch days and, dealing with injured animals, performance, horses, race horses, roping horses, etc. And our bigger horses took longer to heal because of the size of the muscle. I'll assume, I don't want to make assumptions from the animal world to the human world, but in dealing with athletic animals, it seems like maybe for humans, like the larger the muscle, the longer the time to heal. Is that does that follow that as well?
I suppose it's possible. I think I'd be more concerned about the extent of the injury itself. So, how many fibers are injured and that sort of stuff. So if it would stand to reason a bigger calf has more fibers to injure, whether or not that is actually what you'd see in practice in an imaging study would be a player-dependent situation. With respect to Dillon, I believe I read that he was back practicing on Thursday. So hopefully just, one of those small things, maybe even a cramp situation where it's not a significant enough injury to keep him out of practice. And, and Aaron Jones is fighting through a little bit of something too. So you would expect that the Packers would be a little bit careful with those players if there was a concern. We've talked about their conservative medical staff for years and years and years. So good sign that he was back to practice today for sure.
Unmuted. Gene, if you had to get shot, what part of your body would you pick to take the bullet?
Where?
I just like to keep you on your toes.
I'm just gonna.
I'll tell you my answer while you're thinking. I'm thinking in the gluteus. I'm thinking that's probably a
All
useful
right,
place.
All right. So
it jumped up and bit me.
I think that's probably the correct answer. However, there are some blood vessels and some nerves in that area that you probably don't want to get injured. I'm not going to advocate for any particular body part to take a bullet. So I'll leave that one to you.
This is exactly why if I had to choose any of us to help me in committing a crime, it would be Jene Bramel.
There we go.
Can
Matt, you got
plead the fifth already? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Well, I think really more than anything, I mean, I'm just more curious about who's a player that you're probably most concerned about right now as we head into fantasy drafts that you would probably want to downgrade some.
Yeah, I still want to see Saquon Barkley do a little bit more. We talked about Rashad Bateman last week. Let me scroll through. I think kind of the story of this week so far is that thankfully most players that we had some concern about are returning to practice. We've already saw, Carson Wentz is apparently chomping at the bit to get back, I think was the quote that was given. We're seeing Darren Waller come back. Devontae Smith apparently has a chance to play tonight. I don't know if that happened or not. Justin Jefferson already returned into practice. I'd like to hear a little bit more about where we are with Stephon Diggs. Apparently, there's a little bit more of a knee situation happening there. But I think the players that we need to be concerned about are players that we already knew to be concerned about. The Michael Thomases, the Saquon Barkleys, those sorts of players, what have you, the guys that just are clearly not able to get back to practice yet. So I'm hoping that all of the players that we've seen get back to practice this week stay on the practice field and don't have any aggravations. And that's going to be the order of business for the next 7 to 10 days is finding out who might have a chance to play in the second preseason game, who wants to get those reps, as Cecil asked about, in that final preseason game, and see where we're going from there.
It is the Audible Thursday night right here on YouTube, footballguys.com/YouTube.com/footballguystv. Forgive me. It's hot in this. Gosh, it's hot.
It's preseason.
It's the preseason. We're all getting into preseason form, right?
Talking about
Dr.
practice.
Gene, we appreciate you as always, brother. Thank you very much for joining the show.
Absolutely. You guys have a good week. Hopefully have a quiet one. See you.
There we have him. Dr. Jene Bramel. Bloom, give us a game update. Unless that doorbell was yours. Is that why you're muting it? Is that you're still on mute? Is that why you're muting it? Is because your doorbell's ringing?
This house has one of those speakers that notifies you when a door opens. So we'll adjust.
Wait a second. What is that?
It's like when you open the door, it goes front door, ding dong, side door.
What?
Oh, yeah.
That's okay. Again, I'm from the country, so like
yeah, I understand.
All this stuff is foreign to me. But
so unless everybody listening to the show wants to know whenever anybody is going in and out of my house, we'll get there. It's been preseason again. We're working out the kinks. I think the main thing to take away from this preseason game right now, and I don't have it on, but I have been following updates, is Devontae Smith's out there. He played many series. That's why we didn't need to ask Dr. Gene. That's why I came up with one of those out of left field questions for him, because thankfully, and I really feel like I shouldn't say this. Oh, there it is again. This is the new Audible game,
Right.
Who is it? Is it the pizza guy? Is
Right.
is it newspaper delivery?
We just need a flash to your Ring camera, right? We need to have like your Ring camera up.
If we could cut in the Ring camera and just have it up in the corner, and then we could see who's at the door. Yeah.
Does it play wah-wah music when the pizza guy rings the doorbell?
I was going to say maybe we could have, depending on who it is, it could have different entrance music, like a talk show. So Devontae Smith's back. That's the main thing. But I do want to take a moment, and someone mentioned this in the chat room earlier. Brian Sumner, long time big supporter of Football Guys. I do want to say to everybody out there, certainly if you listen to the couch, if you know Fantasy Pros, Mike Tagliere. And he has been in the hospital for 9 days now with COVID. So his wife took to the Twitter waves to ask us to send out as many good vibes, prayers, whatever you want to send his way, because he's a member of our community. And this community has always been really good at taking care of each other. And I'm going to go see if that pizza's here.
Oh, my God. We got to disable that thing like fast. Fast. All right, Matt. Rhamondre Stevenson. We're talking top 5 mover and shakers, top 5 biggest preseason movers. And I cannot tell you how many people in person, and not just opening the phone lines or talking to people, but people are super excited. I'll get tweets like, that New England back, who is he? It's like, okay, it's Rhamondre Stevenson. Had that big run, and I don't care if it's what do you call it, 6-lane highway, right? Like, it takes a lot of talent, skill, and speed, even if you're out running 4th-string guys. Like, that's still quite the accomplishment. So our Rhamondre Stevenson debate continues, and certainly Stevenson got a bunch of fans this last week.
He sure did. And certainly, I mean, I'm a big fan of Rhamondre Stevenson, but Ivan Fears is not a big fan of Rhamondre Stevenson right now, the running back coach for the New England Patriots. When they asked about what he needs to work on, he literally said everything and stressed everything.
Like this, he said everything. He was like,
yes.
Everything. Not very serious, not wink, wink, tongue in cheek.
Yeah, no. So, and Fears went on to even talk a little bit more about Rhamondre Stevenson, about basically saying, when they talk about his talent, he said, oh, he's extremely talented, but basically said to the media, this guy needs to learn how to work, needs to learn how to be a pro. It's more than just about being out on the field. So what that's kind of a message that says this guy is not ready yet to be a reliable starter. And they're not happy with his preparation, probably. They're not happy with his practice habits, probably. I mean, I'm speculating, but this is normal when you have a coach, and Cecil, when you have a coach who basically has that kind of attitude when asked about a player, it's just like Mike Vrabel, former Patriots coach, asked about Des Fitzpatrick earlier this week and said, he's here, but he needs to learn how to do things that make him, that's going to make him a pro. Yeah, I think I saw him. He's here, whatever, we're glad he's here, but he's got to figure out how to be a professional football player. And I think that that's the same with Stevenson. But now the positive about Stevenson is, look, He was a great special teams player at Oklahoma and on a JUCO level, in addition to being a 2,000-yard rusher at the JUCO level. You got to see the great footwork to his game in addition to that 91-yard run. He does have the burst to get into the secondary. He showed that against SEC level defenders in the bowl game against Florida. He's a terrific. He has terrific potential as a pass protector. He's someone that's very smooth, can get in front of people, really knows how to punch, and he has really soft hands and really tracks the ball at a high level. I think this is a guy that, honestly, if he practices to the level that he's capable of, he could be the starter by year's end with a backfield of talented runners. That's how good he can be. Is it going to happen? The odds are against it right now based on the fact that Ivan Fears is basically saying, I don't care about the 91-yard run. This dude needs to learn how to work, and he needs to learn how to be a reliable pro so that teammates can count on him and that coaches know where he stands with the football team. But they're trying to light a little bit of a fire under him. And this is a guy that, I think most of us in the society think that marijuana should be legalized, and we can talk about that one way or the other. But the big deal is that he did get popped for a drug test, which tells you from a maturity level standpoint, you know the rules, the consequences, and it still happened for him in his 1 year at Oklahoma. So, a guy who played a limited number of games after getting his big shot out of the JUCO ranks, and that's why he probably dropped on the draft, in addition to the fact that he, as good as he did to get into the secondary, he is slow at the top end compared to what he does in the first 10 to 15, 20 yards, which is fine. But again, you've got some things working against you that you're going to have to do a better job of. So overall, I'm excited about his long-term future. Short term, I'll take a flyer on him if he drops, but he ain't dropping because people saw him run through that 6-lane highway and do some little stunts here and there with that big old jersey, and they got super excited because that's what happens in the preseason.
Bloom, this was year 16 of the Audible, or should I say is year 16. So in 16 years, how do you handle the preseason and those week one splash guys like Rhamondre Stevenson?
Well, with context, always with context. Rookies, it matters with rookies. It absolutely matters with rookies. And I want to say, someone brought this up to me, that Stevenson actually was neck and neck with Trey Sermon at Oklahoma, right? I mean, they were seen roughly. Do you think, is that a fair way to characterize it, Matt?
Stevenson was brought in and then Sermon left because he saw the writing on the wall.
Right.
So it was actually the other kid, Brooks, that when they were neck and neck 2 years ago.
So that potentially is meaningful, again, as Matt was saying, looking at his career arc. But we have such a long history. The only rookie running back that has done anything significant under Belichick is Sony Michel, and he was a first-round pick. Otherwise, they get redshirt years. Even Damian Harris, he didn't have a 90-yard run, but he did have a very impressive camp in preseason. You heard a lot of really good things about Damian Harris during the ramp-up to his rookie year. And there were even injuries ahead of him, so we were thinking, this is going to be the year. Remember this Cecil on the Waiver Wire show? Oh, maybe this is going to be the week. Maybe this is going to be the week. No, they have a program, and they stick to it. And I think that's one of the things that Ivan Fears was indicating to us is, look, we don't need to trust him yet, and he needs to prove that we can trust him. They've got Harris, they've got Sony Michel, and Shylender, one of our another great supporter, asking about Damian Harris, and I do think Damian Harris is a really interesting guy. I was just talking about him, I think, with Matt Friedman this week. I've been doing so many shows these days; it's hard to keep them straight, but we forget that when the Patriots are a winning team and they have a good offensive line, that lead back can be good. Remember LeGarrette Blount? I'm not saying they're going to be that good or have that many wins, but Damian Harris is someone that we shouldn't sleep on. But they also like what Sony Michel is doing. We know what James White can do. So they have J.J. Taylor, who can do some scat back stuff, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Brandon Bolden's back, so he's your special teams ace. They don't really need anything from Stevenson this year. So I think that Matt is right to characterize it that way. But at the same time, 16 years in, to your original question, how do we handle the preseason? I think it's important. And one of the things that I brought up this week when I was doing the couch with Matthew Friedman was what you really need to pay attention to Not that you should ignore things that are confirmation bias, because you might just be right. So it's okay if you're paying attention to the preseason and something happens to make you even more excited about something you're excited about. The ones that I think you should pay special attention to, though, are the ones that are a bitter pill to swallow. You don't want to back off of your prior. You didn't believe or expect it to go this way, and you see something that makes you feel that seed of doubt, even though it's not what you wanted. That, chances are, is something meaningful. So you need to be changing some of what you think about situations and players. I don't know which ones are exactly right, but it's definitely not the right answer to say, I'm not going to pay attention. I'm not going to do anything based on the preseason.
Yeah, that's the classic overreaction. Nothing matters. The games don't count, but they do matter. And by the way, on the drug test thing, Matt, the word is around players is it's always an intelligence test, because you usually know when you're getting the drug test. So there we have it. We will continue on and talk about the top 5 movers in the preseason. Who are they? What are they? What could they possibly be? The TJ Hockenson thing. I don't know if you guys saw this. It came across the newswire today at footballguys.com. Now, Hockenson, with undisclosed issue, is going to miss the preseason game coming up on Saturday. But Tim Twentyman, DetroitLions.com, says, well, Hockenson could lead the team in catches, targets, and touchdown receptions. Matt, what do you say about a guy that's going off as tight end 6 in 12-team PPR at 506? And the team's website's saying, and this coupled at the same time, and I didn't write it because Khalif is a friend of mine, but at the same time I did back-to-back stories about the Lions. One was about Khalif Raymond getting first-team reps, and I was like, this shows you the state of the Lions receiving core. I didn't write that because Khalif is a friend, and I've appreciated his game, right? I mean, he's hung around, he's bounced around. It seems like every time he gets a big catch, he drops it. But either way, like, you got to respect a guy that's worked his ass off to just stay in the league. But at the same time, we look at the reality, Matt, like, Lions don't have much at receiver. So is this Hockenson hype from the team website legit?
It's legit for the exact reasons you mentioned. I mean, it's funny because in May, I spoke with a mutual friend of ours who has a very deep connections in the league and was looking over Detroit Lions tape and said, the only receiver I actually find, impressive from a explosion standpoint and ability to be consistent with what they're asked to do was Khalif Raymond. And this was before, this was before minicamp. This was before everything. And so it was interesting this week to see that, because when you look at this team, Brashad Perryman's fast, but he can't run routes still. He still doesn't run routes well breaking inside. He's basically a 2-route guy. And then in addition to that, you have Quintez Cephas, who's not explosive. And he can play a little bit outside and make contested plays. But here's the thing. In the NFL, everyone can make contested plays and everyone can contest catches. So that's why at this stage of the game, the Dez Bryant, minimal route, go up and win the ball thing, is no longer a thing. That's why Equanimeous St. Brown is languishing on a depth chart somewhere in Green Bay in the, probably beneath an ice pond right now. Because it's just not a thing anymore that you can build your receiving core off. So when you look at it from that perspective, Cephas is great in that regard, but he's more of a big slot. And they already got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is a slot who can play a little bit on the outside, but is more of a slot guy. And that leaves you with Tyrell Williams, who's a nice number 2 or a underrated number 2 if you need him to be, but he's really a 3. Yeah. So when you put all that together, Jared Goff's going to have to throw the ball a lot to his backs and tight ends. And that's where you're going to see that work out. And they're hoping that there's going to be play action and the long game can free up Hockenson on a certain level. Well, T.O. can run routes, but that's, that's a different story. But the thing is, Hockenson, the biggest issue with him is that if the receivers are really that bad, then, well, we saw what happened in Atlanta back in the day when they used to double cover, Tony Gonzalez with 3 guys in key situations, and they did the same with Calvin Johnson. You'll probably see the same thing with TJ Hockenson at some point if these receivers cannot make defenses pay for paying a lot of attention to Hockenson. So I think number 6 is warranted, but I don't think necessarily we're going to be looking at him as a top 3 player this year unless Amon-Ra St. Brown explodes. Quintez Cephas looks like he's much better than they think he is. And Khalif Raymond shows up and is like, I am the best receiver on this team because I can run routes unlike Rashad Perriman.
Right. Bloom, unmute your mic, brother. As I learn how to speak English.
Baby
steps. In the essence of brevity,
yes,
I have to skip to KJ Hamler. So forgive me. You'll talk about TJ Hockenson, I'm sure, on the dozens of shows you're doing. But we almost had some breaking news today with the Broncos. I don't want to give it too much away, but Drew Lock's probably going to win the job. If Teddy goes out against Seattle and lights it up, then we'll see. But since Sutton really isn't himself, as I mentioned with Dr. Gene, since Tim Patrick has not been practicing, and Jerry Jeudy and Locke just don't have a connection. They just don't. You saw that in the game against Minnesota. The guy that he's latching onto now is KJ Hamler. And Hamler's coming through for him. So I'm just saying, and I don't even know, is Hamler even getting drafted? Probably not. Last pick in your draft, Bloom, you can throw some love for KJ Hamler with the idea that we are on the verge of hearing Drew Lock as the starter.
Yeah, isn't it funny, Cease? Because the 80-yard touchdown in preseason is supposed to make the ADP spike, right? Nothing. Right. Crickets.
Yeah.
Crickets.
And Rhamondre Stevenson, no one could stop talking about him.
Right.
Yeah, KJ Hamler did that, and he's building that connection with Locke at practice, and nobody gives a damn.
I think you laid it out very well, Cease. And I think that we also look at Hamler as a player who's probably going to benefit from the other players on the field drawing coverage. He's going to have one-on-one matchups. We know he has the real deal as far as measurables that translate to the field, particularly his straight line speed. And then we're already seeing that connection. And like you said, Cease, it's like a process of elimination. Well, Sutton isn't 100%. Locke and Jeudy just aren't on the same page. Where does that leave us? So absolutely, I think that is something that people should be onto, and I think it's another example of the very underappreciated part of fantasy analysis, which in some ways is because we're peeking through keyholes, and we can't know this unless you're Cecil Lammey and you're at camp every day. The chemistry between a wide receiver and a quarterback is very important, so we should listen to Cecil like we always do about anything Broncos and really anything.
What, Matt? Real quick, Cecil, what's the over-under that Bridgewater takes over for Locke at, how many games? Because Locke's going to get his last chance, right? So
Week 7. Look for that game because they start with 3 gimmies. It's the Giants, the Jets, and the Jaguars. So you're 3-0, and then you face Baltimore. That's a loss. Then you face Pittsburgh. It's probably a loss. And then you face the Raiders. And the Raiders, let's just say that's a loss. Now you're 3-3. Fangio's almost done, almost the first coach to be fired. You put in Teddy in week 7, again, provided that both are going to play this year. Okay, so if I'm telling you Locke is the starter, which, again, we almost got that today, and we'll see if that happens, they're both going to play. But speaking of play and the guys they should have taken, the final riser or mover that we'll talk about, Matt, is Justin Fields. Let's kind of give us a brain dump here in the last few minutes of the show. In your thoughts of Justin Fields and what fantasy jams should do with him?
They should be drafting him as their second quarterback, or maybe if you're bold, if you like really bold strategies, as your first quarterback. Well, not your first, but along in a committee in that somewhere between 9 to 12 round range, and depending on what your league is like, and know that probably by week 7 he's going to do a Lamar Jackson for you. Or a Josh Allen for you, and be a guy who's going to lead that team in rushing, and he's going to have, and that's going to be supplemented with his ability to throw downfield. He's acclimated fast thus far. Nagy's offense is always a concern. The loss of Tevin Jenkins is a concern, but I think that Fields is dynamic enough of a player that even if he has Josh Allen-esque rookie moments, that he will be able to produce, and they're going to let him produce that way. I mean, I don't think they're going to be like, listen, you need to stay in the pocket more, in this year. They're going to talk about that at the end of the year. So for me, this is a player that some people will say, well, he's raw, he's got things to work on, and he made a lot of mistakes versus teams in the Big Ten that he shouldn't have. But at the same time, he also made big plays in a strong diagnostic way that a quarterback should against top SEC teams, against top ACC teams. So a lot of it is just lapses in general. And I think that this is a team in Chicago that has enough weapons that can help him out when he buys time in a way that I don't think even Mitchell Trubisky could. And part of it is that because I think Justin Fields is better buying time and making good decisions when he's buying time, as opposed to Trubisky, who took too many risks in the wrong places, usually inside his own 20 or inside the opponent's 20. So for me, Fields is a guy I'm targeting in redraft leagues as my second quarterback, where I can get him a little bit later, or if I'm feeling like taking some risks and building up a strong group of players who are non-quarterbacks early, taking him as part of a committee as a quarterback that I think I can lean on by midseason moving forward.
To wrap things up, Sigmund, we had a question from Rob in the chat room. Rob Harden. What's up, Rob? And he wants to know at the beginning of the Audible Live's intro, when you say, blah, 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 we've exercised the demons, let's do it. Now, that's cutting room floor stuff of you and I beginning a show years ago. Now, the exercise the demons thing is a quote from Ace Ventura. I don't really see you as an Ace Ventura guy. Yeah, I don't see you as an Ace Ventura guy. So I think you just said it. Yeah. So, Bloom, let's just say it was divine.
It was divine. And I think what it should show people is that Cecil and I talk a lot. Guys, we've spent so much time together, Cecil. And we unburden. We support each other. We're really close friends, and when we see each other, our faces pop up on the screen. Remember when that was new, by the way? Remember when it was new for us to be able to look at each other when we recorded shows? Right. Wow. It makes you want to talk. It makes you want to share. It makes you want to, again, unburden. And sometimes things get heavy right before a show. And then we have to get in character, get the game face on. And there's that moment that going live. And I think
we're doing it live.
Yeah, and I think what it represents is that relationship we have with the people we spend time with here when we're doing this show, and how special that is. It's even kind of sacred. And when we do that, we do exercise the demons. We do just clear everything, and it helps us. It's therapeutic for us. So I hope it's therapeutic for everybody out there listening too.
And send those positive vibes to our man Mike, please, and thank you. And just have that good energy going forward, man. We're going through preseason. Everybody's getting ready for their fantasy drafts, or you've had your fantasy draft. Just peace and love. We're always agents of unity and bringing people together and not dividing people. So everyone out there, please just continue to have all your loved ones and everyone in this world basically in your thoughts, because there's a lot of heavy stuff out there for sure. And we get to play in the sandbox. Well, we don't always get to do that. So please make sure to maintain that positive vibe and that positive energy. We'll see you soon. He's Matt Waldman. He's Sigmund Bloom. Dr. Gene is around here somewhere. I'm sure he's in the chat room. And I'm Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned and check out footballguys.com. And as always, stay frosty.